So guys, what's this all gonna look like when you're done?
What you do is you pan over to this man right here. He talks.
I have the vaguest idea. It's whatever he wants.
The Indiana Jones story started before I was working on the screenplay for Star Wars. When I was thinking about doing a sort of modern fairy tale couched in sort of Saturday matinee serial vernacular, I was thinking about all the great things I can do. And obviously one of the subjects that came up was to do it in outer space and do it sort of like Flash Gordon. And the other idea I had at the same time was really to do it about an archaeologist who goes around finding ancient artifacts that have sort of a supernatural flavor to them. And both of them would be kind of a serial, non-stop action kind of adventure. I decided to really go with the space idea, and I put the archaeologist on the shelf to gather dust. Then I connected with Phil Kaufman, who's another filmmaker up here in San Francisco, and he got very excited about it. And we started working on it for about 3 or 4 weeks. And he had the idea of making the sort of supernatural sacred object that we were looking for, the Ark of the Covenant, because he'd done some research in that. And we went over that, and I said, oh, that's fantastic. It's perfect. It's just what we're looking for. And then Phil went off to work on a Clint Eastwood movie and said, oh, I can't do that movie now. So I put it back on the shelf and let it gather some more dust. And then I shot Star Wars.
George and I had planned this vacation together. He was going to get away from Star Wars opening, which has become a tradition with both of us over the years. And I joined him in Hawaii, and we were just waiting for the grosses to come in, kind of like, waiting for election returns. And it turned out to be a landslide for George Lucas. And George at that point just, I think, gushed a sigh of relief. And then changed the subject from Star Wars to what I was doing next. And I said, well, you know what? I've always wanted to direct a James Bond picture. And George said, I got that beat. I said, what do you mean? He said, I have a better idea. It's called Raiders of the Lost Ark.
And so I sat down and kind of told him the story about this archaeologist and how it was like a Saturday matinee serial, and he got in one mess after another. And he just said, fantastic, let's do this. Indiana was my dog. Indiana was the prototype from the Wookiee for Chewbacca. He was this big, huge Malamute, would sit next to me in the car, giant bear of a dog. And so I named the character after my dog, and ultimately we put that in the movie. Originally when I wrote this, it was Indiana Smith, and then when I told the story to Stephen on the beach, he said, I love it, it's fantastic, let's go with it. He said, there's only one thing I don't like. I said, what's that? He said, I don't like the name. And I said, well, all right. Well, what if we call him Indiana Jones? He said, okay, that's fine.
I brought Larry into the picture because I had just bought a screenplay of his called Continental Divide.
He said, I'm going to do an adventure movie with George Lucas. And I showed him the script for Continental Divide, and we think you would be the guy to write this adventure film.
And we spent 3 days with a tape recorder going. And in those 3 days, Larry, George, and I pretty much outlined and sketched in the whole plot, the set pieces, and we laid the movie out in 3 days, and Larry had to go off and put it on paper.
George had things he wanted in the movie, and Stephen had kinds of scenes he wanted to shoot, and we were creating a story that would support all these ideas. And in fact, the story we came up with was pretty much like the finished film, but with a few things that we eventually took out.
Larry added so much wit and humor, and Larry brought in such a 1930s Preston Sturges meets Michael Curtiz. Indiana Jones was a little more like Humphrey Bogart from the Treasure of the Sierra Madre, and Larry layered it and flavored it and brought it to life.
And then when I finished the script, and as I had written it all in this, there were no computers then, and I was never much of a typist. It's only since computers that I'm able to type, because you can correct so easily, but I never was much of a real typist, so I always wrote things longhand for years, and this is the original longhand script of Raiders.
I had to get the film financed. Small detail. And the film did get turned down by everybody in town. Nobody would do it because everybody looked at this really gargantuan movie with lots of action and lots of stuff, And I was saying, I think we can do this for $20 million, and everybody's saying, we don't believe you. That's impossible. But I had talked to Stephen about the fact that we really need to do this like a TV show. We really need to do this like the actual serials were shot, really quick and dirty, use old-fashioned tricks, and not spend a lot of time on it. And he said, great, that's the way I want to make it. And finally, we got Paramount to say they would do the film. Then we had to figure out who to cast in the part. And Steve said, here's a suggestion. What about Harrison Ford? And I said, oh, Stephen, I said, he's been in 2 of my movies. I don't want him to be my Bobby De Niro. I don't want to have every movie I make star Harrison.
George and I had tested a lot of potential Indiana Joneses, from Tim Matheson to Peter Coyote to Tom Selleck.
Hello, Murray.
We ended up doing a screen test with Tom Selleck and Sean Young, and it was really, really good. I mean, they were both terrific actors, and it turned out really well.
Look, I did what I did. I don't expect you to be happy about it. But maybe it can do us both some good.
Why start
Just
now?
shut up. Shut up and listen to me. Now, I need that piece your father had.
So George and I pretty much went after Tom Selleck, and then a man who became a very close friend of mine, Bob Daly, at that time the head of CBS, said, wait a minute, we have a series commitment with Tom Selleck called Magnum P.I., and he greenlit the series. Tom had a TV series that took him to great, heights of fame and fortune, and we had nothing.
And I said, well, what are we going to do now? And Steve said, well, what about Harrison?
George called me up and told me that he wanted me to meet Steven Spielberg, who I'd not met before, and sent over a script. I read the script, about which I was very enthusiastic, and went over to Steven's house to meet him. And we had a wonderful discussion. I got along very well, and I was reluctant to sign up for 3 films. But knowing the people involved, I was willing to sign up for 3 in the case of Indiana Jones.
Hello. 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 How are you? I'm fine. How are you? I'm fine.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Whee!
This is the first picture I had ever directed in the UK. And I assumed we would go to the most famous studio there, Pinewood. But George has a good luck theory about all of the Star Wars films having been shot at Elstree in England. So I went ahead and looked at the stages, and they were pretty big.
Now, where are we going to have the obelisk? Remember we talked about on the relief?
Yeah, the seven or
Sticking
eight
up,
feet.
yes.
Yeah, enough to identify.
Just 7 or 8 feet is all we need.
And Norman Reynolds was there with me, and he had done Star Wars. And I was very excited to work with the guy that did Star Wars. And yet Norman wanted to do something different than Star Wars. He wanted this to be a whole genre apart from anything that looked futuristic or anything that reeked of technology. And so all of the models and all of the sketches that he had designed absolutely were much more about illustrated graphic novels from the 1930s.
The more information you can impart to the director in terms of models or things in the round, the better, I think. In order to try and help the logistics of working a set and the number of extras, we actually built a sort of mock-up set to scale of the location, and we actually put these little figures, like 2,000 little figures, dotted all over the models.
And so we laid it out on a huge model, and I used to like to get my little 35mm viewfinder and lie belly down on that model, trying to find all my angles and get all my shots.
Your legs are in a good position for the kick, so now he's coming, you duck and kick at the same time. Boom!
I had a bit of work to do with the whip, and so I got a fellow to come by my house and coach me in whip craft, which is harder than it seems. And then did a bit of conditioning because I knew it was going to be a physical movie.
The outfit for Indiana Jones, basically the leather jacket, the fedora, and the bullwhip all came from the concept painting that I think was based on some old serials from the late 1930s. And so Indiana Jones's costume came complete before anybody was hired. But Deborah really refined the costume, made it less painterly and more lived in and more honest to who Harrison Ford was and how he could wear those clothes. So she pretty much sort of redesigned the outfit so Harrison would indelibly be only Indiana Jones for the rest of his career.
A costume has to perfectly marry the character so that the audience buys the whole thing. The audience had to buy Harrison even in this exaggerated heroic part, as an earthy, brilliant archaeologist, it had to look like a costume that he slept in and had worn every day of his life. But the truth was, it was a new jacket. And not only was it a new jacket, but there were 10 of them. And there had to be 10 jackets because of the stuntmen, because of the doubles, because of the second unit. The night before we shot our first scene, I sat by the pool with Harrison Ford, and Harrison Ford lent me his Swiss Army knife. And with his Swiss Army knife and a steel brush, I personally aged that jacket, and I had metal splinters in my hands for weeks and weeks and weeks. Then, in terms of his hat, I had to have a hat that was unique, but looked like every hat. I had to have a hat that, if you saw it in silhouette, would instantly be recognizable. There's a very famous men's hatter in Britain on Savile Row, Herbert Johnson. I saw a hat with a very wide brim, and the crown was a little bit too high. It was their Australian model. And with a couple of fittings, we got the hat right for Harrison. Got it really dirty. I took the hat and I rolled it up in my hands, sat on it, had Harrison sit on it, and when we got through with it, it looked like a nice, old, very well-loved hat.
I just thought it would be fun to start with the Paramount Mountain. I mean, when I was a kid, my first company was called Playmount Productions, and I had a mountain, which I painted myself. Now, Play Mountain is my name in English from German. Spielberg means Play Mountain.
Cover the mountain with smoke, Stephen.
Tell Kit.
You don't want any in.
No smoke.
Stephen was always coming up with great ideas, which were sometimes a challenge for the production.
Now, can I have somebody for Harrison stepping in?
And we were setting up in Kauai, and he called me over and he said, look, I need to find a mountain. I need you to go find a mountain that looks like the Paramount logo where we can shoot. And I went, okay.
Harrison?
And because it was sort of a last-minute request and we didn't have CGI to fall back on, I had to drive around the whole island until I found a location that would work for us, and for a few extra pineapples, we got it.
Cut.
I had never worked with Dougie before, but I had loved his work on other movies. And I thought Dougie could do anything, because I looked at all of his films, and he changed his style according to what the script was suggesting to him.
I think if you soft light it, we'll see more detail, won't we?
Yes, we will.
I mean, these are scary without having to light them scary.
Exactly, yes. But actually, this is exactly what one needs. It's just a soft,
Just a real soft fill.
He had had a number of ideas about it. He felt, whatever happens, that we would do it on really widescreen, knowing that we were going to have some fairly large canvases. So that format seemed to be right for them. And he wanted the thing to be very strong looking, but at the same time was happy for me to put in all the shadows I wanted. He wanted most things to look realistic enough to make the make-believe possible.
But the thing I kept saying to Dougie was, I said, let's just, make this look like an old-fashioned kind of an adventure movie. So that was pretty much the concept.
The Jovito's are near. Poison is still fresh, 3 days. They're following us.
At the time when I got cast in Raiders, I'd done about 4 or 5 years in the theatre. And then I met with Stephen and we chatted for about maybe 10 minutes. And I didn't know what to say because I'd had no film experience. I'd never stepped in front of a camera before. So I had no idea of what he wanted.
Senor.
The tarantula thing, that was the first day. And that was my first shot of the first day. And this man arrived with a big suitcase, and inside were all these different compartments with what looked like a tuft of straw in each compartment. And underneath each tuft of straw was a tarantula. So anyway, this guy's kind of putting these spiders on me, and these spiders are more scared than I am. And he's kind of keeping up this running commentary about how the spiders, of course, it's very hard to train tarantulas, He's telling me this whole thing about tarantulas. So they put, I don't know how many, at least a couple of dozen. And they're all on me, and they're not moving. And I hear Stephen say something like, "Why aren't they moving? They look fake." And the guy, the spider wrangler, says, "Oh well, because they're all males. You see, we have to put a female in there, then they'll fight." Okay, put a female in there, and he gets a female, and he puts the female spot somewhere on my chair. I can't remember where. Somewhere like here, somewhere, and suddenly, it's like all hell breaks loose. These spiders, they're running and they're dropping and they're kind of fighting and they're running over my face and up, and Stephen's going, shoot, 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 like this, and he's going, Alfred, look scared. I'm going, I'm scared.
The idol in the opening sequence that Indy lifts off the altar, that was very much based on an Inca fertility figure. But I did modify it so that it worked better to be held. The size was obviously important. And Stephen went through what he wanted to achieve, like Harrison lifting it off and replacing it with the sand or whatever it was.
Rumble! Okay, good, okay.
The ball was my idea where we were knocking out set pieces and making suggestions. I just said, you know, at some point some huge boulder should start chasing Indy and almost squishes him 3 or 4 times until he gets out of the cave. And that was just something I thought up. But I didn't know it was going to look as good as that until the day Norman Rendell showed me that he actually made a boulder that was something like 22 feet in diameter. It was extraordinarily large.
The overriding consideration was to be able to stop the thing. You know, if Harrison had tripped up or someone had fallen over and the ball was actually coming through, whilst it was a fiberglass ball, in fact, it was still very heavy and could actually do a lot of damage. And when Stephen first saw it, he was really very excited about the whole thing and immediately said, well, why don't we make it, you know, another 50 feet longer, which of course we did.
Indy's character was always a hero that was in over his head. So he was always getting himself hurt and in trouble, and you know, he wasn't quite up to what he was supposed to be, you know, what the old classic Republic serial hero was. And I think that's one of the things that came off the best.
Dr. Jones, again we see there is nothing you can possess which I cannot take away.
I was sort of failing in my search for the right cast member, and then I saw this British actor and liked him very much, and I met him. He had amazing eyes, his striking eyes. Could see right through Indiana Jones, and I thought, wow, I could have an eye contest here.
You chose the wrong friends. This time it will cost you.
They just said, here's the script, go away and read it. And I sat in the front office and read the script. Plainly a wonderful role. And I'd always in my career, I've done a lot of accents. I've done a lot of different voices, so I wasn't bothered about that. But the funny thing was that Stephen didn't ask me if I could do a French accent. I think he just sort of assumed it. And then I went on holiday after. I rang my agent in London. He said, Stephen suddenly got worried about the French accent. Will you come back to London, because he was by now in Elstree, and prove that you can do a French accent for him? So I got rather nervous at that point, thinking, oh my God, now having got the part, then I was going to be tested for it. So I went to Elstree and went into Stephen's office. There was no problem at all. He said, can you do a French accent? I went, oh, of course I can do it, French, and spoke a little French to him. He said, fine, and I walked out, and that was it.
How did you do the tennis line when you first realized it was tennis?
I looked at him halfway into it, and then when they were finished, I hit the book, and I said, the Nazis have discovered.
It would be really nice right here, Denham, if you could show this is a discovery that is rather omnipotent, maybe just some sort of a smile to him, something that you share a private idea of the greatness, of the importance of this find?
Yes.
Okay.
Because either of us could answer this question.
Yeah.
Both archaeologists.
I'll just start here, and I'll turn into the study of Tavis as one of the possible resting places.
Well, I'd always been a big Denham Elliott fan, and he lent a kind of paternal warmth, a sort of benevolent consigliere to Indiana Jones, who's always saying, I don't want you to get hurt. He's the voice of reason. He's the voice of caution. He's more paranoid than Indy could ever be.
Got to locate Abner. I think I know where to start.
Suppose she'll still be with him?
Possibly, but Marion's the least of your worries right now, believe me, Indy.
It's part of the fun of writing something like this is getting names that really evoke that kind of movie and that era. And my wife's grandmother was named Marion. I wanted to honor her. She was a woman who I liked very much when I married my wife. And I remember I was driving over Beverly Glen, and when you come on the city side, there's a little side street called Ravenwood. And I thought, oh my God, that's perfect. So I put my wife's grandmother's name with this street name, and that was Marion Ravenwood.
Then it comes down, and Marion takes that drink, right? Now you should start you start to be glazing over even as the drink is coming up, right? I always liked Karen ever since I first saw Animal House, and so she was always sort of floating around in a sea of many possible Indiana Jones leading ladies. I used to have all my interviews in the kitchen over at Lucas's place called the Egg Company, so we would cook, and that everybody relaxed. Once you're making bread with your potential director and your casting director and about 5 other people. So that was my technique of trying to get actors to relax in these meetings, and it worked great.
It's really swell. Perfect introduction for your character.
I met Stephen. We just met, had a conversation, and then he flew me to Los Angeles several weeks later, and I did a screen test with Tim Matheson first. So we did the bar scene.
I've learned to hate you in these last 10 years, but no matter how much I hated you, I always knew someday you'd come through this door. I never doubted it. Something made it inevitable. So why are you here? Now, tonight.
And they asked me to stay in Los Angeles for a couple of days, and they brought John Shea in, and I did a second screen test with John Shea.
Karen was the clear favorite because she had spunk and she was sort of a firebrand, and she reminded me of the 30s women. She had that kind of Irene Dunn quality about her, and a little bit of the Carole Lombard, and she just seemed perfect for the part.
Indiana Jones. Always knew someday you'd come walking back through my door. I never doubted that. Something made it inevitable. So what are you doing here in Nepal?
I need one of the pieces your father collected.
If I was going to swing a punch, I wanted to swing a punch, and I wasn't going to, kind of do it halfway.
Do that line again.
I need one of the pieces your father collected.
Like that. On the way back, the punch is in delivery, uncollected.
Okay, then I'll get collected out here. I need one of the pieces your father.
So I think I clipped Harrison on the chin a time or two, maybe, although I never on purpose.
Good evening, Fräulein.
Ron Lacey had a huge history of playing different character parts all over England, but when I first met him, he reminded me of Peter Lorre.
Bar's closed.
We are not thirsty.
Ronnie was one of the nicest of men. He'd been a good working actor for most of his life and had just not got anywhere. He'd actually decided to give up acting, and he became an agent. And I think it was in about 3 or 4 months of, trying to represent his fellow actors when he got cast in Raiders of the Lost Ark, which, of course, got him started again as an actor.
It was kind of scary because Kit West had to set fires close to the crew, but also he had, the big machine that turns the fires off, and all the wood was treated so it couldn't really catch and spread. But, you know, it got really hot on that set. We had everything on fire, the curtains, the window frames, the ceiling was on fire. At one point, the entire bar burns up.
Right from the time that the set was designed, we had to have certain sections which we knew that we would be able to add special pipes in and concrete floor, because that studio had a big blaze on one of the previous pictures, and they were naturally, knowing our intentions of having a fairly hefty fire in there, were very, very anxious. And so we had to go right from scratch and make sure that the materials were pre-soaked in special fire retarding solution.
Going together? Kid is safety first. That's why I usually hire a physical effects supervisor who really puts safety before anything else.
Will Jones, at least you haven't forgotten how to show a lady a good time.
The first question I asked, actually, before I even read the script, when it said it's in Egypt, I said, do we see the Sphinx, the pyramids, or any of that? I said, no, just the streets. I said, then we don't have to go to Egypt. Tunisia is a much easier place to shoot, and we'd been there before, so I knew the country. We found the site for the Tanis digs. This was right in the area we shot Star Wars. The canyon where Indy is above them and they've got the arc going down, it's the same canyon where R2-D2 is taken by the Jawas in Star Wars. It's exactly the same location. And then we went to shoot Cairo. We went to a town called Kairouan, which actually means Little Cairo, so it was quite apt, and that's where we shot all the stuff in the streets.
If I could just do the whole whip fight and the sword fight and everything in here. The orange gag, the butcher's thing, and then the basket comes through here.
Another challenge that we had was, of course, shooting the period for the 1930s. And once we got to these locations, once again, we didn't have computers that could erase wires and TV antennas and everything. We had to do it ourselves.
This is another good angle right over here.
We probably removed 200 or 300 aerials, especially from the wide panoramic shot that brings Sallah and Marion and Indy out onto the veranda. But in a way, I kind of like that a lot of effort went into creating an authenticity that couldn't have been phonied up 23 years ago.
Cairo, city of the living, a paradise on earth.
The first person I offered Sallah to was Danny DeVito, and he was dying to play this character, but he had problems with his television series not being able to make the dates work, and eventually couldn't do it. But he was my first choice to play Sallah. And then when I saw Shogun, I said, I don't know who this British actor is. He's like Falstaff, great basso profundo voice and tremendous sense of humor. And I said, that's Sallah. We got to get him in the picture.
Well, you see, if they call him, if I make it sound differently.
Yeah, make it sound differently, yeah.
But if I do, then I can't have heard it. I went to the store, Stephen, and I said, well, here's the thing. Sallah is described as a 5'2", skinny Egyptian digger. What do you propose, surgery? And he said, no, just, I want to cross between the character you played in Shogun and Falstaff. I thought, oh, that's interesting.
How about just saying, today you rest, you shop, you let Marion spend all your money.
Those scenes were fun. I enjoyed doing those, all the running around in the marketplace and stuff. Any moment where I could join and be useful and resourceful had meaning for me.
Action, Karen. Real tough, real tough.
All of that stuff became a part of the character, and I was really happy to have it, as opposed to just being somebody running, you know, like scared, to have, like, a frying pan in my hand that I could then conk the guy in the head with and stuff.
So leave the door open, right, open now, but hide around the corner, please, yeah? Okay.
There was so much stress shooting in Tunisia that we just wanted to go home. I mean, I had 6 weeks scheduled in Tunisia. I did it in about 4.5 weeks because it was super hot, hard to breathe. You couldn't take a deep breath.
We should have guys up here.
Plus, we all began getting sick. I didn't get sick because I subsisted on canned food from the UK that I just literally opened my cans and sometimes cold had my breakfast, lunch, and dinner from canned food. But all the rest of the crew who ate at the restaurants or at the hotels, they all got sick.
I have never been so ill on a film set. I think I actually had cholera. I had a temperature of 105 point something. I was dying. There's a scene that was actually cut from the original film where a young soldier is ordered to shoot me. Stephen said to me, John, can you bend down to give him a better eye line? And as I bent down, I filled my jalaba in front of 200 people, and I didn't care.
Thank you, mon père. Mon grand-père.
I want you to work on the diction now.
Monsieur Agé.
There would be times on the set where I would use the second camera, and I would be on the second camera, and I'd be either shooting things that Steve had told me, or I'd say, hey, here's a great shot, why don't I try this? And he'd say, yeah, great, do that. And we sort of were trading off operations, and you know, he let me shoot second camera. I think he was doing it just to be nice to me.
If you're trying to escape on foot, the desert is 3 weeks in every direction. So please eat something.
That's one of my favorite sequences, and it was born out of a problem, and that was there was no reason for my character to put on that dress.
It's beautiful. I would very much like to see you in it.
Bet you would. So Stephen challenged me to find something. You know, it was sort of like, okay, well, you come up with a good reason why she would put on that dress, and you show it to me, and, you know, we'll see. So it was not difficult at all to enlist Paul, and we went into the tent and just did little improvisations together. And out of that improvisation came this thought that what if there was a sharp knife that was there on that plate, and what if from the moment I put on the dress you see that I'm using my clothes to hide the fact that I'm going to take the knife, and that we created a little story around that. And we also thought it was kind of beautiful to bring maybe the drinking contest back into the story, and that I think I'm going to drink him under the table to be able to escape. And as we're improvising, I just thought, this is it. You know, we found it. This is just so lovely. You know, it has so many wonderful little twists and turns.
We meet again, Fräulein. You Americans, you're all the same. Always overdressing for the wrong occasions.
You remember this coat hanger sequence, the famous thing where Ronnie Lacey looks as though he's producing this instrument of torture. And Ronnie's such a wonderful actor too. His timing is superb. The audience actually do go, what's he going to do? And then he turns it into this coat hanger.
You see, the scary thing is once it gets long, that's the threat. But then suddenly get to the end, you can look at it just for a moment, to get to the end, and put it together and just instant coat hanger.
It's such a brilliant gag. And it turned out that it was a gag that Stephen had been working up, that he'd used it in 1941 before with Christopher Lee, I think, in The Submarine, playing it. And for some reason or other, it didn't work, and Stephen knew it didn't work, and he was so fond of this gag. It's a nice idea, isn't it, that you keep reworking the gag till you get it right, like Buster Keaton would, you know.
What shall we talk about?
Good.
The Well of Souls, the big figures, the Anubis figures, were jackals of the dead. One of the first things I've thought of really was opening the well and seeing the head of one of these figures, which seemed to me to be, they lent themselves to that, all sort of looking up, you know, ready to sort of gobble you up. But everything in there was really entirely Egyptian, apart from little engravings of 3PO on the wall, one or two other little niceties that Stephen had suggested.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
I cannot tell you how many times I get asked to do asps. Very dangerous. You go first.
Asps. Very dangerous. You go first.
I grew up in Africa, and part of my childhood fears and phobias are very linked with snakes. I was not wildly happy about snakes.
I'll be right down to talk to you about the mechanical snakes. We've got to work out something else. I'll be right down.
I found that I was able to clear up a lot of my phobias on these movies. For example, I never really liked snakes, so I had to find a reptile expert in Europe. And I guess once that I learned that the snakes that we were working with were non-poisonous, it was a little easier to just pick them up. So We brought in a bunch of these snakes and we put them in the shot, and I think we had about 1,000 snakes, which I assumed was plenty.
I gotta have live snakes, and there's not enough. The set's too big for the amount of snakes that we have.
We had 2,000 to 3,000 snakes, and they hardly covered. I couldn't get a wide shot. I couldn't go back because I would see that there were no snakes on the sides. So that's when I said to Robert Watts or to Frank Marshall,
We have to get more snakes. You know what we really need? We need about 7,000 snakes in addition to the 2,000 we have here to make it work.
He said, we don't have enough snakes. Can you get them? I said, absolutely, Stephen. And I rushed away because our mantra then was, we can do whatever you want. So we looked all over Europe and we got 3 or 4 other snake breeders to deliver boxes and boxes of glass snakes.
I just remember this image of these gnarly snakes being regurgitated out of trash cans and then untangled and spread out by crew members all over the floor of this set. And I'm not afraid of snakes, but that made me nauseous. That made me want to puke. Just seeing the Medusa tangles being, just spread around. And some of them were pythons, which they're not poisonous, but man, when they bite, they don't let go. And at one point, David Tomlin got bit by a python. And David just stood there with the python not letting go, and some blood was coming down David's hand. David just stared at it and said, "Hey, somebody grab the tail and give it a snap. It'll make the head let go." I don't know how David knew this. Somebody grabbed the tail of that python, went like this, the shock wave went up to the head, and the head let go. The snake was fine. David got some medical attention, then he was fine.
Okay, watch your hand. He's about to bite you right there. He's about to bite you. Yeah. What his name? He's good for a close-up. He's good for a close-up. One more right here. He's got coiled. No, I want the biters out right now. Two biters. Him and him.
There were a lot of snakes. Actually, I wasn't there when they shot the snakes. And that's one of the reasons why Stephen directed the movie and I didn't direct the movie, because I didn't want to sit on a soundstage with 1,000 snakes for a week trying to get that sequence shot. I'm just too lazy a guy for that.
I want one person whose job it is only to keep the pythons away from endangering the actors.
Let's reconsider this whole thing.
I personally don't have any fear of snakes, or for that matter, bugs or rats, happily. The snake sequence had a lot of people very apprehensive, but it didn't bother me at all, really.
Just get ready to shoot right away.
But the day that the Cobras arrived, everything changed. Everybody was very serious about the Cobras being there. We had anti-venom serum, we had a lot of protection for the handlers, and even the actors were very respectful of these snakes because they were deadly.
In the famous shot of me facing the Cobra, you can barely see a reflection on the sheet of glass that was between myself and the Cobra. They took some elaborate precautions on that occasion.
I told you it would be all right!
And at one point, it hooded and whipped its head off to the side and literally threw venom all over the glass. So that was something that caused everybody to sit up and take notice and recognize that this was not something to play around with.
I do remember the snakes were supposed to recoil from fire, but in fact they got close to fire to get warmed up.
You don't like fire? You do like fire. You love fire. In the script, you're supposed to hate fire. Why do you like fire? You're ruining my movie.
Harrison's in these big boots, and he's got these long, hefty pants on, and he's got the whip, and he's hat. I'm in this little white dress with nothing on my arms and nothing on my legs, and of course I have to lose a shoe, and I'm surrounded by the snakes, and it's just, there was a part of me that I just thought, I want the big heavy boots, I want the big heavy shoes, and I didn't want to feel as exposed as I felt in those clothes often, which of course is part of the fun of the whole thing.
Frozen a second, and then a shriek, and back to Harrison's back. Let's see that. All right, that's just getting up. Good, that's funny. That's the idea.
Karen was really fun to work with because, when I first met Karen, I knew that she was a serious actress, but she's never gone to the school of Indiana Jones. So she took a crash course on a different kind of acting. But once she got into it, She was absolutely terrific. Herself came up with even worse things for me to do to her.
Maybe by that time I could start batting him or something.
Oh, yeah, I know what we should do. When we get to the next skeleton, that's a good idea.
You just drag him.
That's a great idea. Wait a second, that's terrific. So great, my earphone broke in half. That's how good the idea was.
That sequence was much more horrible than the snakes for me because it was physically very demanding. I was alone in the catacombs, and we did a whole sequence of me running through the catacombs and various things happening. But I found that much more difficult than the snakes. I'll take the snakes any day of the week.
And action. No, okay, it's gotta be. Now, but you saw what Karen did was right. What you did was absolutely right. That's the timing of the shot.
But I was so happy when that sequence was completed.
In terms of the flying wing, when I first read the script, I had no idea of what that really meant. So I researched that and discovered that, in fact, the American Air Force had developed a flying wing during World War II that wasn't very successful, but nevertheless, the thing actually existed, and we set about sort of designing the wing for the film.
I remember that was an interesting scene because I began storyboarding it, and I had about 15 storyboards. But then I threw out the storyboards, and I began just to choreograph the fight. And I basically made that scene up as we shot it. One punch at a time, one duck at a time, one almost going into the prop and then backing up. That scene was only meant to be a couple of punches and turned out to be something like 60 or 70 different shots. And that was so much fun to work on because we just were making it up every single moment.
Spend about 6 seconds looking for it and come up with it.
Okay.
And click it when you come back up.
Right.
Just follow the fight without pointing. Okay.
On the morning that we were starting the sequence, all of the stuntmen were sick, and they were at the hotel, and we didn't have anybody to play the flying wing pilot who had to get hit over the head with the chocks, which was a really tough stunt. So Steven said, well, Frank, put on the outfit, get in the cockpit. And I thought, oh, this will be fun. Little did I know that it was 3 days in a jumpsuit in a cockpit that was about 140 degrees. Maybe the stuntmen were sick on purpose that day.
At a certain point, I slipped and fell, and the wheels rode up onto my knee, which resulted in me tearing the arterial cruciate ligament in my left leg in the middle of Tunisia. So rather than submit to any local medical care, we just wrapped it up and put ice on it and carried on.
Holy smoke, my friends! I'm so pleased you're not dead! Indy, we have no time. If you still want the Ark, it has been loaded onto a truck for Cairo.
Truck? What truck?
Stand by, this is picture. Ready, sir? Right. Okay, turn it on and roll cameras.
I had never given up in my life. Of course, I hadn't made that many movies yet, but I had never given up that much second unit before. And I gave the entire truck chase over to Mickey Moore, who I trusted completely. And I had all the storyboards, and he pretty much did copy the storyboards. But he would also throw in 1 or 2 bonus shots, which really gave flavor, even more energy to that sequence.
Now we start to tighten up here where we see the truck now starting to catch up again to the lead car. Reaction, I thought this wasn't in it, but we need it to keep them alive.
Gotta have that.
They're in the front.
Did you add these 2 shots?
Yeah.
Overall, the whole chase was probably 6 to 8 weeks. And then, of course, Steven went back and filled in all the close shots with Harrison. I was able to make 1 shot for Steven with actually Harrison being dragged.
Dragging behind a car. Dragging behind a car.
All right, roll cameras.
I'm sure it's not dangerous. See, if it was dangerous, they would have waited till we got more of the movie done.
Put your head up just a little if you can. That's it. You get a grip. Hold it. That's good. Beautiful. Nothing wrong with that. Stuff.
I would want to see Mickey's dailies before I would see my own dailies. Because I would want to see, well, how's the second unit with the truck chase? And, then remember, dailies have to go to England and then come back to Tunisia. So it was a couple days before I would see any of the dailies from Mickey Shoot.
And I can't think of through the whole chase where Stephen ever phoned and said, Mickey, I don't like so-and-so. Why don't you do it over? That was very encouraging to me and the unit that I had behind me. I had a wonderful unit. I have one belief as a second unit director: the better the help you have around you, the better you're going to be. It was just a matter of being able to get it the way he visioned, and that's what we tried to do.
Terry, go! Terry, go!
We cut, okay, cut.
Oh, great, beautiful. Whoa, thank you, Dickie.
The Bantu Wind was rusty and really, really beaten up, and it seemed to fit the part, as it were. And as the time approached, I decided to go back and just check it out, and to my horror, discovered that the whole boat had been repainted. There were no rust marks. It was painted white and blue, I recall. So with very little time left, I had to actually get our paint team over and put it back to the condition that it was in when we actually found it.
What's happening? We have most important friends.
We tried to get a submarine. We didn't want to build a submarine from scratch, and there was a movie that they hadn't made yet called Das Boot, Wolfgang Petersen's television epic that became a 2.5-hour-long feature film, and they had built the boat, so we rented the Das Boot boat, put our own numbers on it, and shot that in La Rochelle, France.
Not only was the sub there, but there was a Second World War German submarine pen there, complete, even to the graffiti on the walls that was still there from the Second World War. So it was almost a set in existence.
The final sequence, of course, the problem for an actor with that final sequence, and especially in those days when we weren't used to blue screen, was that you had to be talked through every moment.
Belloc starts to hear a rumble coming from the Ark. He starts to hear a sound, and he takes a step back, and the rumble increases, the hum increases, and then a bluish-green gaseous veil spills from the Ark and starts to crawl down the steps.
Everything was storyboarded. So everybody, the actors included, could walk up and say, oh yeah, I'm reacting to that ghost, the pretty ghost that becomes the skeleton that dissolves before the eyes and gets them to start screaming.
And of course, it was my first experience with acting to nothing, you know. I mean, it was Stephen over on the sidelines going, and now the head is exploding, and you know, there's something coming out, which I have now since done so many times on so many films.
Don't look, Marion.
And the glow starts to come up. Glow.
As far as I was concerned, as an actor, the sequence had finished with me screaming. And I'd had to spend quite a few takes screaming and screaming and screaming, so they just got the wide open mouth ready for that sequence. So it was amazing to see the finished sequence and see what they'd done with my head. I had no idea that's what was going to happen.
Of course, which is typical of making movies, there's nothing really there until the premiere, when the actors first get to see what they were being so foolish about.
Cut. Great, John.
Movie making is a collaboration, and we had some wonderful collaborators on this movie, and that's what makes each sequence so exciting. And putting that all together was a masterpiece of editing by Michael Kahn.
Stephen has his famous phrase, he shoots for the editing room, and I had a lot of footage. And it's good to know as an editor that all the pieces you put together mean something, by putting in a certain reaction, or putting in a shot, a point of view, or overlapping track. There's a lot of devices that are used to influence an audience. Millions of people see it and they respond to it. Sometimes it needs just a little touch. It needs another beat, or it's a beat too much. It's all very sensitive. How you put it together really affects the audience psychologically.
I thought when I first read the script that Indiana Jones was going to be fun to watch, and I had great confidence in Stephen as a filmmaker, but you still never know what the mood of the audience is going to be when the film is released. So I was very pleased at the amount of success that we had with it.
Try the hard, and then just like he's made of chiffon, pulling him like that. Try that once.
I was blown away by it when I saw it. I saw a different movie in my head, and I think I came to see that the movie I saw in my head was not the movie we were making. And so I think when we finished the film, I was a little puzzled by what we had done. And when I went into the theater and sat down, I was like, whoa, I got it instantly. I mean, I saw what he was doing, and I saw the film that he was making, and I knew it was really good. I knew it was something people would respond to.
I can't go back and look at a lot of my movies without either punching holes in them or just kind of like flinching and going, ooh, I could have done that better. I have probably a handful of films that I've directed that I could watch objectively as if I didn't have anything to do with the movie. And Raiders is one of those films that I can look at with my kids and divorce myself from all my knowledge and forget how it was made and watch it from the point of view of an audience. And that's what's fun about that picture. That was a gift that Raiders gave back to me, was it let me watch it objectively 20, 25 years later.
It was one of those rare occasions where everything, the script came out better than we expected, the movie came out better than we expected, everything sort of just came together and was brilliant.
That's the way Indiana Jones ought to look.
This is the difference I was mentioning. They asked me what the difference was between the first movie and the second movie. The difference is I play Indiana Jones.
When George and I were in Hawaii and I agreed to direct Raiders, George said that if I did wind up directing the first one, that I would need to direct 3 of them. He said he had 3 stories in mind. It turned out George did not have 3 stories in mind. We had to make up all the other subsequent stories. So it was like 2 weeks after Raiders opened that we knew we were going to have to sit down in the room and figure out what Raiders 2 was going to be.
This is Indiana Jones, the famous archaeologist.
We started out ultimately with saying, well, we had all these sequences from Raiders that we couldn't fit in there.
Raiders of the Lost Ark was too super packed with gags and stunts and set pieces. It's just no movie could hold that much. So certain things carried over, and I always remembered the river rafting scene, which we had written for Raiders, which I saved and kind of bookmarked for another Raiders movie. That went into Temple of Doom. And then we had an entire minecart chase, like a roller coaster ride. That was originally written for Raiders. And so I basically just took it out of Raiders and kept it in a drawer, and then when it came time to figure out set pieces for Temple of Doom, we dusted it off and stuck it in the end of Temple of Doom.
So we took a lot of the good sequences from Raiders and put it in there and then fit the story around it. And this time we hired some writers that I'd worked with on American Graffiti, Bill and Gloria Hike.
George knew about our interest in India. We had traveled in India and we were collecting Indian art and so forth, and said that he and Stephen had decided to set the next in India, and I think that's why he came to us, because he knew we were interested in the country and had some knowledge of it.
And George had one main idea. He said, look, it's going to be a very, very dark film. The way Empire Strikes Back was the dark second act of this first trilogy, he wanted the second indie film to be much darker. So George came up with this idea that it was going to be about the Kali cult and have a lot to do with black magic. And I had never done anything like that before, so I kind of kept nodding my head. Well, if you guys think that's a good idea, sure, I'll go along with it.
The story ended up, for whatever reason, turned a lot darker. I think we decided to go darker. Part of it, I guess, I was going through a divorce at the time and I wasn't in a good mood. And part of it was just, we wanted to do something a little bit more edgy.
Harrison really got into even better shape because he had to have his shirt off for much of the time. So Harrison did a lot of weight training and aerobic training, and he just got himself into peak condition.
That's it. Never mind.
Aren't you going to introduce us?
I looked at a lot of possible indie girls.
This is Willie Scott.
I really wanted to bring Marion back, but George and I discussed it and thought there should be a different Indiana Jones lady in each of the different films. So we started looking for a nightclub singer named Willie Scott. Willie was named after my dog, by the way, because since Indy was named after George's dog, Indiana, and I had a dog named Willie, and then Short Round was the name of Bill and Gloria's dog. So Key was called Short Round. So in that sense, all 3 characters were named after our house pets.
I got a phone call from my agent saying the sequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark is being cast, and they would love to meet you. And that's not my kind of movie. I was looking at foreign films, and I was looking at little art films and, you know, being a very serious actor studying in Manhattan. But while I said I didn't want to do this movie, of course I did very much want to do this movie, because if I did a movie like this, it would certainly elevate my opportunities to do more movies, and that's really what I wanted to do, was just as many movies as I could. So I prepared and I brought in a lot of props. I like to keep busy because that's one way for me to stay calm and not get too nervous.
You know, just when my career is starting to pay off, you come along. You stick a knife in my dress, Paris original. I'm in the first ever gunfight with real goddamn bullets, and then you crash an airplane. You crash an airplane. You call yourself a doctor.
And I thought she was absolutely Willie. She wasn't spoiled, and she wasn't that character in real life, but I mean, she had the energy to play that girl. I remember taking the tape over to Harrison's house that night and saying, look, I've got about 15, 20 girls on tape. I only want to show you one. And I put Kate in. No second choices for Harrison. He said, she's the one. And that's how Kate got cast. George's idea was to start the movie with a musical. He wanted to start the whole film with a Busby Berkeley dance number where Willie Scott comes out singing some song. George didn't know what song, but that was George's contribution to the opening teaser and all of our story meetings. He said, why don't we start this movie with a musical number? He said, hey, Stephen, you're already saying you always want to shoot musicals. You're a frustrated musical director. I said, yeah, that'll be fun. So we hired Danny Daniels, the choreographer, and put together this crazy number based on Anything Goes.
They're supposed to reveal the same time.
Okay, this side was late revealing, that side was early.
Okay, girls.
And Kate had to, A, learn the entire song in Mandarin, number one, and then learn all the choreography. And luckily, what I didn't know about Kate was she could also sing and dance. She has a great voice, and she's a wonderful dancer.
So, Mr. Spielberg, how does it feel directing a musical?
Well, it feels just swell. Just swell.
It was an actress's dream come true. Singing, dancing, costumes, but we got the dress on, that little red number, and it fit like a glove. And so I couldn't dance. I didn't get to do the dance number. So all the tapping that I had done, it was heartbreaking. So I did a little this.
I don't know what I'm speechless. You know what I mean? I feel like this is 19.
You wanna go to the prom? Yes. You wanna go to prom with me?
Kate Capshaw had to wear this glamorous sequin dress, which I had made by Barbara Matera in New York, and it was completely made of original 1920s and 1930s beads and sequins, which Barbara had been collecting for years and years and years. But this meant that there was only enough stuff to make one dress. But this didn't seem to be a problem because the dress was only used in the script, was only used in this one sequence. And then, of course, the whole schedule was rearranged, and this sequence was going to be shot, instead of shooting it first before we went to Sri Lanka, it was the last thing we shot when we came back from Sri Lanka. But the crunch point came when we were night shooting, and it was a scene with Harrison and Kate, and they were sitting by a little campfire, and the dress was hung over the branch of a tree behind them. And they were shooting the scene, and I looked over, and an elephant was calmly eating the whole back out of the dress, and the whole back was eaten out of the dress. So when we came back to England to shoot the scene where Kate had to look smashing in this very, very expensive dress, Barbara Matera, who'd made the dress, had to be brought first-class British Airways over from New York and installed in a suite at the Ritz Hotel with the few pots of beads and sequins that remain to repair the dress. And of course it was me that had to sign the insurance claim, and it said reason for damage. And what could I put? All I could put was dress eaten by elephant.
I hate that elephant.
I didn't know how to scream. That was the first thing. I did not know how to scream. By the way, I didn't read all that either. And then she screams, and then she screams, hello, can she do anything else besides scream?
The biggest trouble with her is the noise.
A running joke on the film that, of course, later really got us. But I couldn't scream. And so Stephen taught me how to scream.
This would be a great scream. Ready? Here it goes. On three. You count to three.
Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Now, they'll loop me later. They'll dub it a great scream. It'll be a great scream. Put in Fay Ray from King Kong. That's the best scream I've ever heard.
I mean, you know, screaming is not as easy as it looks.
Wow, holy smoke! Crash landing!
I was 12 years old when I auditioned for this part. And basically, they had an open call at my elementary school. And all the kids that fitted the description would call into the room to meet this casting director.
Key was truly remarkable and quite unique. And when we did the open call, he actually didn't show up to do the interview. He brought his brother. And the entire time that he was trying to tell his brother what to do, we kept looking at him and finally said, you know, who is this kid? And asked him to sit down and do the audition.
You cheat!
Are you saying that I cheated?
Yes!
Can you prove I cheated?
Yes, I saw it!
You saw what?
I saw you just put a hand in it. You cheat, Dr. Jones! You cheat!
What do you mean?
Use the full card!
Oh,
You paid
together.
now!
They were
No
stuck
mistake!
together.
No mistake!
A mistake!
I'm very little. You cheat very big!
He was a real natural actor. He believed what he did. He invested emotionally in what he did. And I really enjoyed working with him. It was great fun.
It's something you have to learn to do very easy. It looks like you're working real hard, right? But when you start, you can do it just like that.
After the audition and they told me I got the part, then we got on a plane and went to Sri Lanka, which sort of replaces in India in the movie. And that's where the adventure begins.
Of course it was set in India. I went to India first. We found all the locations. They were fairly well spread. But the one I liked best was the Amber Palace in Jaipur that we were going to use as the Maharaja's palace. I then began the negotiations with the Indian government, you know, for permission to do it. They have to vet the script and everything. And they began to ask for all these changes in the script.
All scripts that are made by foreign film companies have to be submitted to the government for approval. Indians are very sensitive about foreigners criticizing anything in their country.
I rang George and told him, I said, look, I'm getting an awful lot of trouble out of the Indian government about the script. And when eventually I'd done everything and I discussed it with George, we'd set it in a little principality on the border of India, so it wasn't actually India, all this stuff. And in the end, they said, you can't use the word Maharaja. Well, that did it. I said, I've had enough of this. And I rang George and I said, I found everything in Sri Lanka apart from Maharaja's palace. They don't have them there. How about a nice couple of matte shots and we build the courtyard on the back lot? We're going to shoot the interior of the studio anyway. And he agreed, and then I took it to Steve and he agreed, and that's what we did.
We built a village in Sri Lanka, just outside of a small town called Kandy, right in the area where David Lean shot many scenes from The Bridge on the River Kwai. I'm such a film fanatic for certain kinds of movies that I just wanted to go near where he shot his great epic.
All right, here we go.
How quiet? Here we go.
There was an actor who I believe was Sinhalese and spoke Sinhalese, but didn't speak English at all, hardly at all. And his whole part had to be in English. And so what I had to do was, I've never done this before, I had to speak the English and he copied my English. So I actually would sit there and say to him, like monsoon, and he would say, like monsoon, and I would go, and I actually did this. I said, it brings darkness. And I moved my hand across my eyes, and he said, it brings darkness.
What has happened here?
The you will start in Bangkok, then like monsoon, it moves darkness over all country.
And that's basically how I got him to speak English. And the pauses were built in, so you have to imagine my voice to understand why there are so many pauses before his next line, because I'm trying to get my words in there for him to repeat after me. And it's somehow kind of in a kinky way, and thank God for Mike Kahn, my editor, he sort of made it all work in the cutting room.
Putting that scene together for Stephen, I had to find, it doesn't look that way, but I had to find the line that works and how to cut away for something, then go back for the next line that works, maybe overlap a line, because he had to feed him every line, to keep refeeding him the lines. And that's the way the picture started, and it was very difficult to make that work.
Can you provide us with a guide to take us to Delhi?
Yes, Sajnu will guide you.
Go on the elephant!
Indiana, I cannot go all the way to Delhi like this!
In Temple of Doom, we had elephants, and of course, Sri Lanka had plenty of elephants. So they actually had an elephant orphanage where we went. We got some elephants, and they were trained and brought up to our location.
Good mount. That's the way to get on an elephant.
Well, riding elephants looks like fun, but in fact, you have to sit right astride the shoulder muscle, the muscles behind the back there, and you sit in a position where it kind of pulls you apart. And I think that was the beginning of the herniation in my back.
It's fun. This is so horrible to say. I didn't really read the script very carefully. I was probably too busy packing, getting passports, and I didn't know that there were snakes. And then someone said there are snakes, because at the very end of the 3 weeks in Sri Lanka, they're building this little pond, and you're going to be in the water, and a snake is going to come out of the tree. It's going to come down behind you while you're freshening up in this little pond. And I'm thinking, I don't think I can do that. I think I may have articulated this to Frank Marshall, and it was his idea to go to the set where the snakes were going to be on the sand, and we were going to go and we were going to have a little visit with the snakes. And I went over and looked at it, and looking at it, I get tears in my eyes, and I'm having a hard time breathing, and I'm looking. I could almost work myself up right now. And I went over and I put my hand on this snake, and I lost it.
She was shaking, and she was all white, and you could see right through her makeup. She had lost all of her color. And I said, I'm not going to put you through this. Let's cut it out. And I cut the whole scene out of the movie. I think she probably years and years later married me for that.
I was so relieved. And he said, but you have got to do the bugs. Like, you know, a kid, right? Okay, you can't do this, but you have got to do. And I didn't know about the bugs, and I went, the what?
And then as a kind of reward for me, we had this fake snake that she was going to have over her neck, and she said, I want to use the real snake. And this is like 3-4 weeks later, we're shooting at Elstree on a soundstage. And she actually let that one snake come down around her neck, go around here, and she said, I said, cut it out! And she got her hand around it. It was a living snake, and she threw it. And I think that was her way of saying thank you for my cutting the other whole snake scene out of the picture.
Ooh, what big birds!
Those aren't big birds, sweetheart. They're giant vampire bats.
Those bats are their fruit bats, they're called. They're really big, and they migrate at sunset. They move, so that every day they'll fly over.
This is just like the birds. It's like when they were all sitting around on the jungle gym.
So those bats are real. They actually were there. And we basically put them in, and that line where Harrison says something like, those aren't birds, honey, they're giant vampire bats. They're not vampire bats, they're fruit bats. Vampire bats are really small.
I'm Chatar Lal, Prime Minister to His Highness the Maharaja of Pankot.
I had given up acting and left England, gone back to India, and then Attenborough pulled me out to do the Gandhi film. I did it, and in 1982, Gandhi had come out. People liked what I did in that. I did My Beautiful Laundrette in 84, and I think I had done that tiny role in Passage to India, which people remember. A very sort of cool, laid-back lawyer, you know, like that, who's bored by everything in Passage to India. I think that was it. And then Spielberg and Temple of Doom.
Still the expression of tremendous pressure and pain roll out towards us.
So once again.
If you think of those movies from the 30s and Republic serials from the 30s, you know, they take themselves a little bit more serious. But at the same time, there's all these sort of Abbott and Costello movies and kind of Laurel and Hardy and sort of The Thin Man. There's all these kind of movies that are sort of upbeat, which is what we wanted to infuse in Raiders, and which I had done in Star Wars. And so there's this kind of goofy 30s humor going on through the whole thing.
Ah, sneak surprise.
What's the surprise?
And I think that scene at the dinner table does sort of capture that spirit. I mean, we did have a lot of fun discussing it because it was, oh, let's sit around just thinking the most horrible things you could think of, but it's done very tongue-in-cheek.
I mean, that was something that I'd always want to put in a movie. And Steve sort of has a sense of humor that fits right into that. He loves practical jokes on people, and I know he used to do a lot of that with his sisters. He used to, you know, throw spiders at him and things like that all boys do. But he really still loves to, you know, make creepy crawly things and have everybody go, oh my God.
I said, what about a meal of the worst stuff you would never imagine eating as long as you would live? You know, like eating eels and eating bugs and eating brains from monkeys. I think in a way, by doing a kind of dark version of the Indiana Jones series, it gave permission to poke some fun at ourselves and have a scene that was really, you know, toward gross out comedy. So we had rubber bugs with, you know, don't worry, when you watch the movie, inside of bugs is custard. And inside the monkey brains was custard with raspberry sauce.
Do you have anything simple, like soup?
And also inside the soup was just rubber eyes that had these little stickums, and each eye stuck, and Kate was told that she had to really stir the pot to get the eyes to come unglued from the bottom of the pot to float to the surface, which was hard to do. Most of the takes, only one eye came up.
I step on something.
Yeah, there's something on the ground.
In sitting around with Gloria and Bill and George knocking out the story, we were trying to think, okay, what's worse than snakes? What can we do in the follow-up of Raiders of the Lost Ark, now a globally known movie? What can we do that won't let the audience down? And I don't know whose idea it was, but somebody said bugs. And so I said, yeah, great, we'll get millions of bugs.
Yeah, sure, as long as I don't move, I'm okay. Frozen in position. Stop breathing. It's a flying scorpion. Yeah, great.
I became the Bugmeister, and I found a guy in England who did bugs.
That one's on my neck. Can we get that one off my neck?
So we created this whole really disgusting bug hotel where we kept the bugs, and we had all sizes and varieties. And Kate Capshaw was not acting when we were dropping the bugs on her.
They make me do the most awful things. I have to play with bugs.
Get in the set and do the bugs.
No.
Do the bugs.
No.
Do the bugs.
No.
She promised me when she wouldn't do the snake, she'd do the bugs.
Okay, I'll do the bugs.
Do the bugs.
I was really asking people, is there a pill? There must be something I can take to keep myself from freaking out. Because I don't want everyone to look at the movie and go, she's on drugs. But I did take something that was like a relaxant. And I came to the set, I was like, hi, Stephen. He goes, hi. I go, and he said, we're gonna do the bugs. And I go, okay. He said, well, I'm gonna come, you know, I'll stand with you. And I went, okay. He said, now stand here, we're gonna pour some bugs on top of you. All right, where will they be coming from? Well, we're gonna pour a bunch of buckets of bugs from up above you, and they're gonna just come down onto you, and it's gonna be several buckets. Okay.
Cut. Okay, right.
You know, that's how it was the whole day.
Yeah, you take them off.
Okay, we gotta get Robert down here. We don't have enough bugs to make the scene work. We need 50,000. I can't do this.
I contributed the Spike Room concept from many of the serials that I had seen growing up as a kid, where there were rooms with spikes in them, and it was just a flagrant homage, so to speak, to those old Republic serials, and so I wanted that in the movie, and that was part of the story meeting very early on, and so when it came time to build it, I was so excited to watch that set be constructed.
Elliot Scott was the production designer, and we wanted this ceiling coming down, but the spikes start coming down in advance of the ceiling. So synchronizing that, we did that with electric hoists, and we just timed it. And luckily for us, the electric hoists were just a perfect speed.
And it was a diabolical scene because it was also a race against time. And I remember that being one of the most enjoyable set pieces of that entire production of Temple of Doom for me to shoot and for Mike Kahn to cut. We had the best time, especially since the little coda that I added at the end, where after they finally come out and she leans over and her butt hits another device and the whole thing starts over again. That whole sequence is, I think, for me as a director, is the most successful of all the set pieces in the movie. That, to me, is my favorite scene. The evil temple. It was huge. I mean, when I walked on the set for the first day, it looked like an opera hall. It was just one of the biggest sets that I had ever seen. And it was a great set, and Dougie did the most ingenious lighting. He lit the pit with a lot of 9 lights, with a lot of red gel on it to give the fire effect coming up.
Thanks for the cross light. Thanks for the hot light. Thanks for the dark faces and the hot backlight and all that crazy stuff.
Dougie, I think, did his most daring lighting on all those kind of darkly evil set pieces in Temple of Doom.
I was lucky enough on the Indiana Jones trilogy to have two great art directors, Norman Reynolds on Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Elliot Scott on Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and also on The Last Crusade. The interesting thing about the sets, all 3 films seem to require fairly large interiors. We often had to use the largest stage in the studio. Quite a problem to light it away because they did need actually an enormous amount of light. And the great thing about both those art directors is that they were very helpful, and I would ask them if they could cut certain sections in the rocks, that were the things that were supposed to be rocks, to enable me to hide lights, to illuminate the scene. So it did enable me to get the quality of light that I particularly wanted in there.
Soon we will have all the 5 Shankara stones, and the Thuggees will be all powerful.
Oh, that was 1984, and he's still more or less at the top of the villain heap. He's India's #1 villain, certainly India's richest villain.
As he comes in, she's looking...
He had a good build even then. I think he was a wrestler. He didn't do weights and things, but he was a big guy even then. And he was bald for this. Do you know, he has never since had any hair. He shaved it like Yul Brynner ever since that film.
As I start bringing it, I start speaking the film.
Yes.
Harrison had a back injury on Temple of Doom. During the shooting, Harrison's back herniated. When he was fighting with the Thuggy inside his suite in the Pankot Palace, he did that scene where guys got him around the neck, and Indy like flips his body back to knock the guy off, and that's where Harrison's back went. Man, he let out a call for help at that point. That was such a knife wound, almost like a stab right through his spinal cord.
Nothing that I tried, therapy or drugs or icing or anything else seemed to help. And I woke up one morning standing by the side of the bed and was unable to move either forward or get back in the bed. It took me 45 minutes to get back in bed.
I was back here in the States actually when that happened, because I would go back and forth, and I got this call, and Steven said, Harrison is really in bad shape here, and I don't know what to do about it. He said he's working, but he's really in pain, and I don't know how much longer this is going to last. So I said, okay, and I jumped on a plane, and I got there the next morning, and Harrison was in really terrible pain. He would be on the set on a bed, and then they would sort of lift him up and get him, and he'd sort of walk through his things, and they'd get him back on the bed. And I said, we can't do this. I said, if we have to shut the picture down, we'll shut the picture down. So I just said, let's get an airplane, let's fly Harrison to Los Angeles, let's have this operation happen as soon as possible. And we did.
Quiet, please. Harrison Ford has a message for everybody here. I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. The good news is Harrison Ford is fine. He feels great. His enzyme papaya treatment worked fantastically well, and he's doing exercises and getting back into shape. And the bad news is he needs until August 8th to get back into shape.
Harrison had this very controversial papaya enzyme surgery performed on his back, thank God successfully and permanently. And I was left in London for 3 weeks with a double, stuntman Vic Armstrong. So I shot the whole fight on the big crusher on the conveyor belt with Vic Armstrong. That wasn't storyboarded. That was pretty much shot. Like I shot the flying wing in the first Raiders, I just pretty much made it up as I went along. And Vic and I shot most of that scene. And then when Harrison came back 6 weeks later, I just plugged in Harrison's close-ups.
It was a pretty remarkable recovery, I think. Pretty much based on the fact that I was in pretty good shape for the film to start with, and it helped a lot in my recovery.
Ever since I was a little kid, I loved Jackie Chan movies. I always watch them, and I'll practice kicking my brother, poor little brother. So it was fun doing those.
Concentrate on spinning. Yeah?
They did have a martial arts instructor on the set with me, which coached me for a few hours.
That's it, good one.
Other than that, you know, I just went out there and did it. And it was pretty much, you know, from watching all those Jackie Chan movies.
As we get into the mine car to make our escape, Key had a stick, and they were made of balsa wood, which is nothing, feels like air, like styrofoam. And he hit the big guy, and when he hit the big guy, it broke in half, and the other half hit me right in the eye. It felt like a slap, and the next morning when I woke up, I had what no one would believe. It was like someone took black paint and then just did this to me. So when I turned up to the set the next morning, I came in just to block the scene, and the entire set had their black smudge. So we all had a black eye.
All I do is come up like this, grab like this, and then take a rubber rock,
Right.
and
boom! That's great, because here's what Pat will be doing. Pat will just be walking up the track, stalking you like this.
I didn't do as many storyboards on Temple of Doom as I did on Raiders. Part of that was because I was not exactly secure with the story, and I always had some problems with the darkness, and I thought maybe I should, I needed to be more spontaneous to try to put more humor in where it needed humor. All the big set pieces I storyboarded, but some of the in-between action fights, I just sort of left it to all of our first impressions, seeing the set for the first time and getting ideas and just figuring it out. Of course, certain scenes, it goes without saying, like the minecart chase was storyboarded because most of that was done by ILM back in the States, shooting all the miniatures.
let her go! Let go of the brake!
Elliott Scott had built this actual mine train, and it had certain, you know, like a roller coaster. It had dips, it had little valleys, and it was the circumference of the entire soundstage.
It's a great reveal coming around the corner, and suddenly seeing about 20 yards, 30 yards of track,
And then what we did to make it look like it was different, we just kept changing the lighting.
One of the lucky things that happened to us was when we found our location in Sri Lanka, which was in a little village about halfway in the middle of the country named Kandy. Right up the road from Kandy, a big British company was building a dam. So there was all of this equipment and expertise and engineers in this town. And one of the things that we needed was a suspension bridge. And we found this gorge that was up on the other side of the dam. And these engineers came and they designed this bridge for us. They built the bridge for us. And it was a very lucky situation for us because to bring the people in to do that would have been really cost prohibitive.
Yeah, it's real scary. You mean we can cross here?
Stephen was really scared of the bridge because it was a real suspension bridge over, I guess it was 150 feet clear fall before you dashed yourself to death on rocks and shallow water.
It's very bouncy, Steve. Very bouncy. It is. Boy, I'll tell you, get out there, those guys.
I have a terrible fear of heights. And when the bridge was finished, I could go out 40 yards from either end, but I couldn't go to the point of no return. Just couldn't do it. Harrison, in the meantime, said, "Oh, that's nothing," and he ran across the bridge. First time he got on the bridge, he ran as fast as he could from one end to the other. Couldn't believe he did that, but that's Harrison Ford. Yes, he's Indiana Jones. Garrett Brown did the Steadicam work, and Garrett's shaky. He hates the bridge as much as I do. Garrett won't go out 40 yards either. And I said, "You're smart, Garrett. You and I are not going out 40 yards." So we stayed. And by the way, the bridge was the safest bridge you could possibly imagine, but I just couldn't look down, and so I kept most of my shots on either the first third or the last third and didn't go in the middle physically with a camera.
Okay, that's the shot, Gareth.
Hang on, lady, we're going for a ride.
Oh my God!
The moment on all the films that I think was the most crystallizing for all of us was the moment we cut the bridge on Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. The bridge was strung on steel hawsers across this canyon. And for the bridge to cut, George Gibbs, who was the special effects guy on that, had the whole thing rigged with some form of electrically detonated charges that had to cut 4 steel hawsers that were through that bridge.
The thing was that we'd never tested them or had time to do any tests, so we just had to do it.
And the bridge was rigged with all the dummies. For the first time ever, we had created dummies that, as they fell, they kicked. You know, nowadays with CGI, they cheat. We actually did it for real, and the dummies, if you look in the film, do kick as they fall, and they go like this.
There was always this discussion who was going to make the dummies, and we were told there was somebody in America who specializes in dummies, and then I never heard anything, and we were ready to go to Sri Lanka in about 6 weeks' time. So I finally said to Frank Marshall, I said, Frank, what's happening about the dummies, you know? He said, you make them. Why don't you make them? You know, just like that, you know? So there we had to work out a way to mass produce 14 mechanical dummies, you see.
Okay, anytime, George.
So we just went and bought mannequins, and we used them to make molds, and then we just put crew mechanics in, and they just worked off ordinary flat batteries.
George, that was great. Just great.
And then we had a switch with a wedge in the switch made of rubber. It was actually a doorstop. And we tied a string from that to the bridge, and then we set all the dummies up so that when they fell away, they pulled the wedges away from the switches, and then the dummies just started flinging their arms and legs in the air.
It was an exciting sequence. Stephen wanted all the cameras he could get, so naturally the second unit worked with him. And George Lucas was on the set, and so that gave us another good man behind the camera.
Well, so far, let's review the cameras. We've got Arri with a 40. We've got the Panastar going about 48 frames a second up there with maybe a 50. Right. We got Garrett with the Steadicam up there, and we'll shoot, that'd probably be a 75. So that's 1, 2, 3 cameras. We got one down there is 4.
Shot is 4.
This division on the bridge is 5. 6 will be on that side. And we have 2 more to play with.
But that moment, every camera we had is pointed at the bridge from every angle that we possibly might need. And those are the moments where you stand, because I'm going, what if 3 of the horses goes and 1 doesn't?
All right, here we go.
The bridge had to fall in one shot, in one take, with 8 cameras rolling on it, and have it work, which is always a terrifying moment when they go 3, 2, 1, they hit the button, does it work?
Action!
And it went, and it was perfect. Now, those moments are like incredible, because it's one go. If we'd blown it, I think it'd have had to be in some ILM fix, because we could never have re-rigged it. It wasn't possible.
And then we go to England and continue shooting.
And cut.
All the shots looking up was in London with only a small bridge. And then the wall, we built a wall for all the stunt work when the bridge was hanging, and they were trying to hand over hand to get to the top. That was just shot on like a flat perspective, shaped like a mountain cliff. The third component was all the alligators. Frank Marshall took a second unit crew to Florida and shot the alligators. So it was shot on 3 different continents.
2 down, 1 to go.
That's right.
2
1
down,
to go to complete
2
the
down,
trilogy.
1 to go.
We have 1 more of these to do.
When Temple of Doom came out, it ultimately did about as well as the first one. Even though it was dark, it sort of got hit by reviews and things because it was so dark, and people sort of complained that, you know, it wasn't for kids.
We did not get an R rating. We, in fact, got a PG rating. But it created a tremendous controversy, and people talked more about how inappropriate Temple of Doom was for younger children. And I felt there should be a rating in between PG and R. And so I called Jack Valenti, the head of the Motion Picture Association of America, the MPAA, and said, can't there be an in-between rating? And I actually said it could be like PG-14 or PG-13. And he said, let me get back to you. And the next thing I heard, Jack Valenti was able to institute, for the first time in many decades, a brand new rating.
I think we went darker than any of us really wanted to go. But you're in the middle of it and you're doing things, and it's a matter of what you do every moment. And you don't realize what has happened until you put it all together and you see it as one piece. Because you do a little dark thing here, and then you do a light thing, and then you do another little dark thing, and then you do another little dark thing, and then pretty soon you put it together and you realize, uh-oh, it's darker than it is light. And this stuff is stronger than we thought of it as. But I don't mind the film. We definitely wanted to make a different movie from Raiders. We didn't want to just do the same movie over again.
But because this was supposed to be a different kind of movie than the first one, it was supposed to be a scary movie and more of a horror film. We were really surprised, and I think the reaction of the critics was somewhat harsh.
Here, hold this.
The other thing that they didn't like was the portrayal of the female.
Where's my gun? Where's my gun?
I burnt my fingers and I cracked a nail!
So again, here I am, college educated, master's degree, half of my doctorate. I'm a single mom. I am woman, hear me roar. I'm living the life of such a feminist. And here I am being, not attacked, but I'm definitely being called on the carpet for creating this female that was, stereotypically not a feminist, with her fingernails and her this and her that and her whining and complaining and screaming. I couldn't have had more fun doing it. I'm afraid I just said, we're making an adventure movie. We're telling a tall tale.
I was fairly well pleased with the final result. It certainly was a darker kind of story, but well worth it, I think, for the originality of that film. Compared to what I think expectations were for it, it was a little bit more challenging than I think what people anticipated.
Just as you'd launch, the guy takes a swing and misses. He said, great, he likes it.
Of all the Raider indie films, Temple of Doom is my least favorite. I mean, I look back on Temple of Doom and I say, well, the greatest thing that I got out of that movie was I met Kate Capshaw, and we were married years later, and that, to me, was the reason I think it was fated that I make Temple of Doom. And so even though Indiana Jones wound up getting the girl, I really did.
Larry Moore curling.
Woo!
He does that.
He does that like that.
The original story for the third film was a haunted castle movie. But Steven had just finished Poltergeist, so he said, I don't want to do another haunted castle movie. So I said, okay. I said, what about the Holy Grail? He said, oh, you brought that up last time. I don't like that idea. The Holy Grail isn't strong enough. And I said, well, give me a chance with it. I'm going to take the haunted castle and put it at the beginning for the teaser, and then I'll do the Holy Grail. And we did that script, but it didn't really turn out that well.
With Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, I wanted to flesh out Indy's relationship with his father. And I said, here's a time we can really do a really good character study of who gave birth to this guy. I said, George, let's see who inspired him. Let's do a father-son story. And George said, well, is that going to be conducive with a Grail search? I said, well, the search for the father is the search for the Holy Grail. And if they're estranged by bitterness of experience, different ideologies or different approaches to archaeology, the father is more professorial than Indy ever was. The father is more critical of Indy. So I basically built up this kind of relationship between Indy and his dad, and then when it came time to casting it, I said to George, there's only one person that can play Indy's father, and that's, James Bond. And the original James Bond, and the greatest James Bond, Sean Connery. And so we went for broke. We went after Sean, and fortunate for us in the movie, Sean said that he would do it.
I was absolutely delighted, and I had a lot of notes, as usual, about the whole piece. And after all, if you're going to make a film with the father of Indy, You really have to have some kind of eccentricities and what have you. And anyway, at first it didn't bode too well because I think George had a different idea, Lucas, of what it was about. Probably a bit more Calvin-like and conservative in that way. Anyway, when we went to the meeting at Amblin with George and Stephen, it went very well.
Well, I was a strong proponent of the idea of bringing Indiana Jones' father into the story and showing some new aspects of his character that we hadn't seen in the first two films. The third film benefits greatly from Sean Connery's presence, which kind of elevated everybody's game. I think it's by far the most sophisticated in many ways, and it was maybe the most fun of all of them because it had great locations, great physical sequences. It had a terrific leading lady, Alison Doody, with a real intriguing story to tell. The woman who had a relationship both with my father and with me, and the complications that ensued from that. I had great fun with it.
No, just another day at the office.
Speaking. Mark. I told Stephen, what if we started out with him as a little boy?
Indiana. Indiana. Shh.
Just let us see if we can work this out. You know, I think it might be an interesting idea, and it gives the whole thing so much more depth. So he said, well, okay.
That cross is an important artifact. It belongs in a museum.
I was interested in playing a young Indy and kind of had some insight on Harrison's way about him, being that I worked with him on Mosquito Coast. And while doing Mosquito Coast, I kept a close eye on Harrison, and I noticed some of his traits. And you know, when he would turn around, I would sometimes mimic him and get a few laughs. And
how about this?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
I felt, you know, close to it. I felt I could do it.
Give me that moment. Yeah, give me that moment of humiliation, and then go, go fast. Right, good. That's lovely.
Well, River, you know, I love River's work, especially when he was in Stand By Me, and I think Harrison actually was the one that suggested River. He said to me, the guy that looks most like me when I was that age is this actor named River Phoenix. And I believe that's a Harrison Ford idea because he played Harrison's son in Mosquito Coast. And I met River and thought he was great and cast him.
Right, that's right, exactly. That's good. I wouldn't do that, but I like when it wraps around you. Wrap it around you again. I like that.
The movie has chosen to pick young Indy up at a certain point in his life where he experiences many different things which are very significant and forever change him. Forever. And basically he'll never be the same. For instance,
Oh my God.
you see how he gets this phobia for snakes. And how he learns how to use a whip. And he cracks that whip. And in the process of doing so, he goes, "Walla poo," and the very end cuts him, and there you have the scar.
We thought it would really be fun to show how Indiana Jones got the scar on his chin, because in real life, Harrison Ford has a scar on his chin already.
Oh, I had a car crash when I was about 22 years old, 23 years old. Ran a car off a road and into a telephone pole.
Yeah, well, the second one is the one where it flies back in the face. You see it pretty well. River did it before with the felt whip.
Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, I just wanted to bring back the spirit of the original Raiders and have some fun. I wanted to bring the cast back that I had missed in Temple of Doom, so Denham Elliott came back and he was in a key role, and bringing back Sallah and just bringing the spirit of what got us so pregnant with the series originally in 1980.
How long have I been looking for that? All your life?
In a way, I was rather the sort of father figure in the first one, and then those real fathers turned up. My role in that direction has been superseded, so Steven Spielberg has turned him, I'm very glad, into a sort of figure of fun who's got 3 left feet when he's outside his own environment. And he never stops doing the most terrible things at the wrong moment, and it's great fun. There's quite a lot of comedy involved.
Does anyone here understand a word I'm saying?
My name is Donovan, Walter Donovan.
I know who you are, Mr. Donovan.
I suppose it was my friendship with my next-door neighbor, Robert Watts, who was the executive producer, as you know, that pulled me into this whole genre, really. And indeed, he did Star Wars, the first Star Wars. And this quite small part came up in Empire Strikes Back, and I went to meet them, and I got it. And so when Indiana Jones came along, there was a part of the sergeant, the German sergeant, for which I was eminently suitable. And I went up to be interviewed for it, and I didn't get it. And the next day, my agent rang and said, well, they want you to go along for Walter Donovan. I said, what, you mean the main villain? He said, yeah. He's American, don't forget he's American. So I did this terrible phony interview with a ghastly American accent. It was awful. And I got it. I couldn't believe it. It's one of the most happy experiences of my life.
By the time we got to the third film, we had a pretty well-honed team. Most everyone had worked on the two previous films, and we were a pretty fast-working, efficient group, which was good because it was probably the most complicated of the films that we had done.
We shot in Venice. Well, Venice was another thing, because Venice, in summertime, is really crowded. And I'd said going into this film, I don't want to go near Venice in the tourist season. Guess what? We shot there in August. We got control of the Grand Canal from like 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. on one day. But there was the TV aerials on the top of the hotels on the other side of the Grand Canal. There was nothing I could do. You know, this is the problem when you're shooting, period. I couldn't do anything. Dougie said, it's all right, you won't see them. I thought, God, thank God for that. But we did it, and we managed.
Marcus Brody?
That's right.
Dr. Elsa Schneider.
How do you do?
I was living in London, and I simply went for the audition, thinking there was no possibility of me getting it because I was 21 and Irish, and they were looking for a 29-year-old Austrian. Before that, I'd done some TV. I'd done work with Jonathan Pryce. I'd done a Bond film, A View to a Kill, playing Jenny Flex. I think I was one of the first girls that they saw. I auditioned and met with Steven Spielberg and everybody, and then they asked me to come back to do a screen test. I remember thinking, oh God, you know, will it be me? And I was lucky. I was really lucky.
Action. Don't look at me like that. We both wanted to go.
Basically, I had to acquire an Austrian accent, so I did a lot of work for that. And before I knew it, I was on the set shooting the first day, and it was actually one of the last scenes. So I arrived on set with Harrison Ford and Sean Connery and Denham Elliott and Steven Spielberg and George Lucas and little Alison Doody and with an Austrian accent filming one of the last scenes. So I was really thrown in the deep end.
Action!
Oh, rats.
The rats was the follow-up to the bugs, which was the follow-up to the snakes. I think we're running out of things to do here, you know?
My job was, how do I find 10,000 rats? We had a rat breeder, we had a couple of rat breeders, and we started breeding rats.
Because in order to have rats that aren't infected with some virus or disease, you have to basically cultivate them from living births. So our animal handlers gave birth to something like 2,000 living rats. And they were everywhere. Now the set, you know, the set was half water, it was like an aqueduct. And we had rats, you know, walking the very narrow lips of the aqueduct and coming out of holes. Rats in poor Alison Doody's hair. I put bugs in Kate Capshaw's hair, put snakes around Karen Allen's neck, and now we were putting rats in Alison's hair. I mean, do we have any shame? No, we don't.
Unfortunately, the female characters in Indy had to go through the most abuse of the kind of creepy, crawly, disgusting scares.
That was a big bone of contention as well at the audition. They were asking whether I would have a problem with that scene, and I said absolutely not. They're not your average sewer rat. You know, they were clean rats, and there was no problem with the rats.
Well, happily, rats are another thing that don't bother me very much. When I was a young teenager, I was a nature counselor, and coincidentally did have as pets black-hooded rats. First 2, and then pretty soon many, many, many more as they multiplied. And so I was quite used to handling rats.
Actually, I mean, they have personalities, rats do, compared to snakes and
An insect. Man bites rat. Freak accident.
Well, I'm not going to set a live rat on fire. I might have no shame, but I do draw the line somewhere. We had a lot of mechanical rats that were created just to set on fire. So all those were mechanical rats that were immolated toward the end of that scene.
An awful lot of the movie for me was very physical. I mean, the running scenes. I mean, the whole piece in Venice. I cannot tell you how scared I was. I'm running in high heels. My shoes are giving way at this stage. They're very wet. And I'm jumping from wet shoes onto a wet boat. And it was tricky. I was driving this boat, and I had never driven one of these boats before, and the whole thing was just move into the scene, get out of the scene, let them do the fight, and I kept banging into the walls, and they were going, it's fine, but just come back into the scene now and go out of the scene, and it was just chaotic. Chaotic, but they knew exactly what they were doing. It was just mad for me, and it was a very physical scene as well, with Harrison fighting on the boat and everything.
I hate shooting in the water, even in tanks.
Well, we were on the back lot of Elstree in the little pond there. I guess they call it the Studio Lake. Not quite a lake, it's much smaller than that. Elliott Scott and George Gibb had built this tremendous propeller on the back of part of a ship. And the thing moved around, and it was made of metal, so it was not safe to be anywhere near it, and we weren't, and we did use stunt doubles for certain scenes.
That part where the propeller was in that tank was about 15 feet deep, but the rest of the tank was only about 4 feet deep. So we had the boat that was rigged onto a long track, and then we had a big winch that pulled the boat along slowly into the propeller. And as the propeller chopped up the boat, we had explosives in the back of the boat just to enhance it and make it look a bit more interesting.
We made the back of the Chris Craft inboard motorboats a little bit longer so the prop could have a lot of boat to eat up and not put the actors in harm's way. And by shooting with a very long lens, I think I shot with a 250 millimeter focal length lens, it made you think that the actors were closer to the props than they actually were.
Now battle off and tell Baron Brunwald that Lord Clarence MacDonald and his lovely assistant are here to view the tapestries.
Yeah, that's good. That's very Scottish.
He's very Scottish?
Yeah, very Scottish.
Expert on Scottishness here now. Today's expert on Scottishness.
I had a Scottish Terrier that looked like that. That's what I know about Scott. And action.
Junior?
Yes, sir.
It is you, Junior.
Well, Sean, at first he resisted the idea of playing my father. He's only 12 years older than I. And also felt that the character was too thinly drawn. And he's a great student of history, Sean is. So I think he brought a lot of ideas to George and Stephen, which were incorporated into his character. He is less Yoda-like than originally thought of, and quite the match for his son in many ways, including the fact that the central heroine has had a physical relationship with him before she ever meets me.
How did you know she was a Nazi? She talks in her sleep.
Sean made major contributions to his character and to kind of the story throughout the whole production. Sean would come over to George and I and say, look, anything Indy does in the story, the context of this story, I have done better.
But we were able to twist it into something funny and make it all kind of humorous rather than serious.
I can't forget how wonderful it was.
Thank you. It was rather wonderful. One wanted to make not a very harmonious relationship to begin. When we discussed it, like sleeping with the same woman was a bit of anathema for George. But he eventually came round to it because it's possible and funny.
What you taught me was...
We had dialogue like sitting down for the first time, and Harrison said, well, you know, you never took any notice of me when I was a kid.
That we've hardly spoken for 20 years. You left just when you were becoming interesting.
Well, that's a terrific formula. And it makes for good comedy character and fun stuff that plays right.
I gotta tell you something.
Don't get sentimental now, Dad. Save it till we get out of here.
The floor's on fire. See?
What? Fire's like a wild animal. Once it gets going, it takes a lot to stop.
Dad, move!
Working with fire, you have to really be careful what you're doing because it can easily get out of hand. On the different parts of the set and all the curtains and the drapes and the furniture, everything is fireproofed with a special solution. But you have what we call a gas poker. It's like a long bar, could be 3 feet or 6 feet long with a long slot in it.
Yeah, Dave, no higher. That's good. No higher than that.
And the fire comes out the gas poker. And then when they cut, we just turn all the gas bottles off and the fire just goes out.
Kids don't try this at home. It's really best left for professionals like us. People who really know what they're doing.
The search for the Holy Grail is also the search for Henry's book, his diary.
You're going the wrong way. We have to get to Berlin.
Brody's this way.
My diary's in Berlin.
That diary is sort of like the Ark of the Covenant. Keeps switching hands, goes back and forth. First the good guys have it, and the bad guys have it, and the good guys get it back. So the movie does become a chase movie, and when I cut the movie together and looked at it, Mike Conner and I put it up on the screen, just the two of us, we realized that the film did not have enough action, at least not enough action that I thought the audience was expecting.
And cut.
So we thought of a good scene in the sidecar with the motorcycle and did a very short chase, shut up in the Bay Area, outside of where George lives in Lucas Valley. And that was fun to shoot.
You know, we had a lot of Nazis in the film. All of those uniforms, I think, were genuine ones that I found in Eastern Europe somewhere. Joanna Johnston worked with me on the 2 last Indiana Jones pictures. I would give her research pictures and sketches and drawings and things, and then she'd go out and find it all.
All you guys who do this, you can have your fingers crossed behind you.
We played one of the scenes on the Zeppelin. All the passengers were wearing fur coats and hats, and it's supposed to be in the wintertime. And I played it without my trousers. And Harrison said, "You're not going to play the scene without your trousers." I said, "Well, if I don't, I'll be stopping all the time because I sweat enormously. I sweat very easily." Well, he did the same.
I didn't know you could fly a plane. Why, yes! Land, go!
Michael Kahn, what he contributes when he edits the sequence that's been put together with the special effects, the designer, the cameraman, and of course Steven's direction. Now Michael, with his skill, will fine-tune it so that the audience's emotions are played out to the absolute edge.
I edit from feeling. And if something feels right, then I go with it and I show Steven. And sometimes he'll say, "Why'd you do it?" I say, "Well, it felt right." Because that's the biggest positive thing you could say, is that it felt right. If you try to edit cerebrally, you know, from knowledge, you don't get the feeling. You don't feel the scene. It becomes mechanical.
This could be close.
And we always try to get beneath that, Steven and I.
Or the shot that I like when the plane goes into the tunnel is there's one moment where the pilot of the plane just kind of casually looks as he passes Indy and his father in the car. There was so much humor to be mined in a father-son movie, especially when they haven't been getting along in 20 years. The fact that Indy's dad keeps topping Indy. He uses the umbrella to make the birds, the seagulls, take flight and then get caught up in the props of the Messerschmitt, coming around the corner for a third strafing run. And that brings the airplane down, and Indy just looks at his dad walking away with the confidence of a man who still has an umbrella on a nice sunny day. The umbrella's up, and Indy looks at his father with so much love in his heart for his dad, with a whole new level of respect and admiration, and that's what made that movie worth shooting.
Sean, the minute a pigeon comes out, start running. Okay, and...
Did the camera stop?
And roll. And release the pigeons.
The seagulls, that was a problem because seagulls aren't trainable. What we did in the end, having got a guy to try and, he said, you can't do anything with them. What we did was we put fake seagulls all over the beach.
Okay, Sean. Action, Sean.
And where Sean comes and flaps the umbrella and they fly off. For all the birds flushing up through camera, they're all white doves. They're not seagulls at all because they're trainable.
Why don't we just use the VistaVision camera clean and mat them all in later? Let George Lucas worry about it.
The tank chase, the Messerschmitts, the tunnel, all those things. I wanted to find somewhere that was workable, good infrastructure and the rest of it. And Spain, of course, has it. Almeria in Spain, some moons ago in the days of the spaghetti westerns and everything, was a huge filmmaking centre. I did a western down there in the late 60s. So I went back there and we found all the locations in Almeria. For the tunnel where the plane crashes in, we did the stuff with the Messerschmitts, we did the stuff with the seagulls and the entire tank chase.
When the original script, there was no tank sequence. There was one scene with the tank. George wanted an old World War I. George just said, look, I just want an old World War I tank in this movie. I don't know what to do with it, but we have to have a tank in the picture. So I basically wrote the scene in storyboards. I wrote the entire horse and tank, then Indy jumps on the tank, and then Sulla comes with the horse, and he gets back on the horse again with the father. He transfers the father back on the horse. All that was done storyboarding.
And then this is just after the tank explodes. Then a little further on, we did this. Okay, this is where we make a hard turn left to right. Left to right.
Originally in the movie, it was just going to be a small French Renault tank. We went to the museum, we looked at these different tanks, and I thought to myself, no, I'm going to build it for real. I'm going to build it in real steel. It looks solid and heavy and weigh 28 tons. It won't bounce around like a toy, see? Yeah, we actually had two tanks. We had another tank which was built from aluminium, and this tank was pulled along by an open-back truck, so we could put the cameras on it and things like that. And the tracks were reproduced in polyurethane, and the tracks never actually touched the floor. That was used for the close-ups of Harrison's head near the track, and Sean Connery bouncing up and down, things like that.
It's a very original sequence. The notion that George and Stephen had about putting my father in the tank and me having to thus stop a tank and all of the physical opportunities that presented for stunts and also joke gags.
The scenes on the tank was originally scheduled for something like, I think it was 2.5 days or something. And I think we went to about 8. Or it might have even been longer, 10 perhaps. And but it didn't matter because there was a lot of invention, with a lot of ideas, and the kind of comedy that comes out of the reality of it.
When we started shooting, the scenes where Harrison Ford is hanging on the gun, we did all that with Harrison Ford. We never used a stuntman. And we found this ridge of mud about 8 feet high, with a pathway along the top, and we had prop men running along the top with wheelbarrows, tipping clay and dirt on top of Harrison Ford as it was going along to make it look more exciting.
Here we are. It's just after the big explosion. We turn left. You got that? Good.
Don't keep blowing off, because I can't use the parts where it comes off his head.
Okay, boss. The hat was always coming off. But pull it down as tight as you can and stop when it flies off and start all over again.
That should do it.
Well, it was great to shoot in Jordan. David Lean had shot Lawrence of Arabia in Jordan. and we were guests of the royal palace in Aqaba. We were guests of King Hussein and Queen Noor, and they treated us great. We actually stayed at the royal palace for the 5-6 days we were shooting, and Queen Noor with her kids drove me to location a couple days. And even though we couldn't, like we did on Temple of Doom, walk in Sir David's footsteps, we were able to shoot at Petra, which was an amazing piece of architecture just cut right into the sandstone canyon walls.
Step back now, Dr. Schneider. Give Dr. Jones some room. He's going to recover the Grail for us.
I mean, this is a great drama to tempt a director to say, I'll make that movie. To prove whether you believe or don't believe the myth of the Grail. Donovan turns the gun on to Daddy and shoots him right in the stomach, and he falls over.
The healing power of the Grail is the only thing that can save your father now. It's time to ask yourself what you believe.
Now, Indy has a finite amount of time to discover the Grail, the cup of Christ, and to bring back the healing liquid, to feed the father, and to pour over the bullet hole, and to make it all go away. It's redemption. Redemption of the soul, redemption between a father and a son. And that's where you know a story is working, when you have that kind of drama, and you can shoot one of the leading characters.
Well, it was a little tricky, and we were all a little nervous about that. That sort of evolved in the script before we actually took that chance. So it seemed very logical to connect it that way and have the extra pressure on at that point of Sean Connery dying and Indiana Jones having to get the Grail and get back in order to save his father.
So he's got to make a jump to the eye. He's got to really hope it works. And he goes, eye, and it works. Okay, the eye holds. What's the next word?
No,
E.
E across there.
E,
I can't
and
take him too far forward.
Good, that's good. He goes here to the E, and then
So
H.
3 on the H there.
Let's make the H where the F is, so it's a longer jump.
Okay.
Well, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the whole movie thematically is about leaps of faith. Personal leaps of faith, to trust your love for your father when all your experiences have told you that there's not a relationship to be had there. It's one leap of faith after the other. And of course, there's many betrayals on that sort of broken highway. And one of the greatest leaps of faith was the one where Indy has to step into nothingness and winds up stepping onto a forced perspective, onto an actual wall made of rocks that is painted to look like what's below, meaning the perspective looks like there's nothing there. And he must make a leap of faith and take that one final step until he hits a rock bridge that spans the abyss. And that was one of the most interesting things ILM did.
Which one is it? You must choose. But choose wisely. For as the true Grail will bring you life, the false Grail will take it from you.
Well, the actor Robert Edison, who played the knight at the end, that extraordinary monk-like figure, just guarding this one great secret. He was such a wonderful actor, Robert. Fantastic voice, too, wonderful rolling voice. And he came in and I thought he lent a tremendous gravitas to that part. But at the same time, he was able to take that wonderful line, "You chose poorly," in such a dry way that it was really funny. When I saw it, it got an absolute belly laugh.
He chose poorly.
When Elsa takes the Grail and she tries to flee, the minute she crosses the seal, she's thrown off her feet by an upheaval. She falls and drops the Grail. That's when the crack forms.
On the different parts of the set, I think we had about 5 gimbals, what we call gimbals, and that is when the ground can sort of rock and roll. And they were all hydraulically controlled, so we could give the appearance of an earthquake. And then we had a gap that appeared in the earthquake, which Alison Doody falls down when she's trying to get the golden chalice.
And the great moment in that movie for me is the moment where first Indy is holding Elsa, and Indy says to Elsa, "Give up the Grail. Honey, I can't hold you. Give it up." And Elsa keeps trying to reach greedily for the Grail cup. And of course, the glove comes off her hand, and Indy can't save her, and she falls to her death. All of a sudden, as Indy almost slips over, the father grabs him. Now, the roles are reversed. Here's father holding son, and Indy has the same kind of moment. He's being attracted to the Grail, And the greed that Elsa felt in her heart suddenly suffuses through Indy. And all through the movie, you'll recall, Dad only calls him, Junior. The whole film, he tortures him by calling him Junior. But for the first time, he says Indiana.
Indiana? Indiana?
Let it go. And that stops Indy. And then Indy takes his other hand and he's pulled to safety. And that was the bonding moment between father and son.
The thing I liked the most about the film is, in the end, the real pleasure was in finding each other and throwing the Grail away and realizing that, Indiana being with his father was more important than any of this other stuff that was going on. Was a great ending because it didn't have anything to do with the object. In the end, we always have to get rid of the object somehow. That's always a problem. And this was the perfect way of getting rid of the object. It was the perfect way of telling the story.
So the drama of Last Crusade doesn't end with a truck chase or a climactic upheaval of special effects and ghosts and spirits, but it ends in the most personal way, more personal than any of the previous Raiders movies, where Indy and the father have a meeting of the minds and a meeting of the hearts. And then he's rescued, and we go off to our little epilogue and go save Marcus Brody, whose horse runs away with him.
Indy, Henry, follow me. I know the way. Ah!
Well, that's getting there, Denham. That's getting there. We got the horse to move a little bit that time.
Well, I like movies that are all about craft and collaboration. Films that kind of rely on the best of all departments. The best plasterers, the best electricians, the best painters, the best special effects experts, the best property masters. And when it all comes together and you don't do it in the computer, and I'm not being Luddite when I say this, but when you're really having to rely on all the different departments, just like old Hollywood used to do and old England used to do, to realize the director and the producer and the writer's vision and the actor's vision. That's good old-fashioned movie making, and I love that.
That was great. That was really great.
We had an extraordinarily talented group of people. I mean, the whole crew was, first rate, and in a lot of cases we've all worked together before, so it's a kind of a fun reunion. We all like each other. We all get along really well. People can sort of anticipate everybody's extremely professional and talented, and that's always an exciting experience. And it's always a thrill to see Harrison in that outfit. It's like he becomes that character, and you walk on the set, and there he is. And it's such an icon that it's like, oh wow! It's like no time has passed at all.
Oh, this is the way I make my living. This is what I do for a living.
I think the audience likes a character who is both an academic and an adventurer. I think what's probably the most important contribution that the character has made, that is part of the character, is his tenacity, his unwillingness to give up, his zeal for the hunt, and the pleasure that he takes in going amazing places, seeing bizarre and amazing things, and solving the mysteries that lay before him.